Good afternoon and welcome to the fifth and final session in our series of CEU lectures. I'm John Shattuck, President and Rector of Central European University. We're starting just a little bit late, so we will go a little bit longer beyond 3 o'clock. I'm sure you'll all agree that this has been an extraordinary week. And it's been my great privilege over the course of the week to host these path-breaking lectures by George Soros, held here in Budapest at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences under the auspices of Central European University. Today, we have reached the grand finale. Never one to shrink from controversy or prediction, today George Soros will bring together the themes he has been exploring throughout the week and turn his attention to the future. He will outline key global trends and discuss their economic and political implications as he sees them for the years ahead, focusing in particular on the increasingly important role that China is likely to play on the world stage. As we've done throughout the week, we're expanding our audience today far beyond Budapest and are including students appropriately from China, from Hong Kong University. This will complete our unprecedented 3-continent, 5-university global outreach to students who are participating in these lectures through interactive video conferencing in real time. Our moderator for this lecture is Howard Davies, director of one of the world's great universities, the London School of Economics and Political Science, whose students were part of our global audience on Monday. We also have a distinguished former international leader here in the front row who will offer a brief commentary from the floor, Cristóvão Buarque, a Brazilian senator and former candidate for president. Mr. Soros will speak for approximately 50 minutes, following which Mr. Davies will briefly comment. Mr. Soros will then take questions, starting with 3 questions from Hong Kong and then more questions from the audience here in Budapest. And now, to deliver his 5th and final lecture, I'm delighted once again to introduce George Soros, who will take us into the future with a grand summation of his thinking about our world.
Thank you. In these lectures, I've offered a conceptual framework for a better understanding of human events. These events are not determined by timelessly valid scientific laws. Such laws exist, of course, but they are not sufficient to determine the course of events. The complexity of the situations is one reason, and the role of the participants' thinking is another. I have focused on the reflexive two-way connection between the participants' thinking and reality, and I emphasized the causal role that misunderstandings and misconceptions play in shaping reality. But these influences have been strangely ignored. They introduce an element of uncertainty into the subject matter, which, except in the simplest situations, make it impossible to predict the future. One can still sketch various plausible scenarios and evaluate their likelihood. One can also prescribe desirable outcomes. I've done both many times. Indeed, I can claim to be a specialist in it, focusing on predictions as an investor and prescriptions as a philanthropist. I've been successful enough in the former to be able to afford the latter. I should like to devote today's discussion to this dual task. We are at a moment in which the range of uncertainties is unusually wide. We've just passed through the worst financial crisis since World War II. It's quantitatively much larger and qualitatively different from other financial crises. The only relevant comparisons are with the Japanese real estate bubble, which burst in 1991 and from which Japan has still not recovered, and with the Great Depression of the 1930s. What differentiates this crisis from the Japanese experience is that the latter was confined to a single country, while this crisis has involved the entire world. What differentiates it from the Great Depression is that this time the financial system was not allowed to collapse, but was put on artificial life support. In fact, the magnitude of the credit and leverage problem we have today is even greater than in the 1930s. In 1929, a total credit outstanding in the United States was 160% of GDP, and it rose to 250% by 1932. In 2008, we started at 365%, and this calculation doesn't take into account the pervasive use of derivatives, which was absent in the 1930s. And yet, in spite of that, the artificial life support has been successful. Barely a year after the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers, financial markets have stabilized, stock markets have rebounded, and the economy is showing signs of recovery. People want to return to business as usual and think of the crash of 2008 as a bad dream. I regret to tell you that the recovery is liable to run out of steam and may even be followed by a double dip, although I'm not sure whether it will be in 2010 or 2011. My views are far from unique, but they are at variance with the prevailing mood. The longer the turnaround lasts, the more people will come to believe in it, but in my judgment, the prevailing mood is far removed from reality. This is characteristic of far from equilibrium situations when perceptions tend to lag behind reality. To complicate matters, the lag works in both directions. Most people have not yet realized that this crisis is different from previous ones, that we are at the end of an era. Others, including me, failed to anticipate the extent of the rebound. The confusion is not confined to the financial sphere. It extends to the entire international arena. After the collapse of the Soviet Empire, the United States emerged as the sole superpower. No other power or combination of powers could challenge its supremacy. But the unipolar world didn't take root. When President Bush sought to assert America's supremacy by invading Iraq on false pretenses, he achieved the exact opposite of what he intended. The United States suffered a precipitous decline in its power and influence. So the disarray in the international financial system is matched by instability in international relations. The new order that will eventually emerge will not be dominated by the United States to the same extent as the old one. To understand what's happening, we need a different conceptual framework from the one to which we have become accustomed. The efficient market hypothesis looks at financial markets in isolation and totally disregards politics. But that gives a distorted picture.